Today we will talk about work, but more in the way to how do we make our work lives better and more rich. In our classes, we usually start with a welcome ritual. So now I would like you to turn to your right or left and then design a welcome ritual. In this context, maybe think about a reunion handshake. Like how would you design you are back to Stanford, design an interaction like a handshake with your pair. So I will give you 2 minutes. This is really a warm-up. Awesome. I think I saw some new handshake rituals. Can I see a couple of them? Do you guys want to show yours to the group? Yeah. Okay, nice. Maybe one more before we continue. Okay, that's a very simple one. Cool. I think there are two reasons we do this warm-up. One of them is we are wired to create rituals. Like it's in our innate capability. Recently, I read an article. It was saying there is evidence that people started to create rituals 420,000 years ago. So they found these feathers in Israel, like close to Tel Aviv, and then these are showing that these feathers were probably used for creating rituals for people. So another reason for doing this warm-up is the mindset of, oh, I can design something by myself. It's not a higher authority that defines the ritual usually. I think traditionally we think rituals are defined by someone else, more like a hierarchical authority, but we have that capability to design our own rituals. So that's a quick warm-up. So today's arc, so there will be 3 sections. At d.school, we usually run classes in an interactive way. So it's usually a little bit lecture and then exercise, a little bit lecture and exercise. So I will give you a taste of that today. So we will start with what kind of culture we want. So more set up the stage. And then talk a little bit about rituals, like how rituals can be a strategy, can be a tool to intentionally build culture. And then we will move to the third section, that I will talk a little bit about the types of rituals. So beyond what we typically perceive rituals are, so there are more ways to think about rituals. So let's start with setting the stage, like where we are in our work environment, work ecosystems right now. So when we look at the as-is situation, so past 20 years, Gallup is very good at assessing employee engagement. So it shows this very low engagement, 32, 34% engagement. And if you look at the disengagement, this is 17%. So that's one trend, it's been almost like a defined trend. But when we look at the other side of the coin, what we will see is millennials and Generation Z, they are facing burnout in their work. In one way or another, they have these burnout moments. So this is really interesting. So if you are too disengaged or you are too engaged, you end up in burnout. So this is maybe engagement is not the only way we can assess workplace culture. So this is more like one trend we are seeing. Another thing we are seeing as means of workplaces, these blow-ups. So they happen. We heard of these things when there's these huge blow-ups in different contexts. I don't want to even go into the details. But these are the facts of our lives. We hear from newspapers, and we usually almost think culture as something too huge, too big to address. So it's we realize the importance of culture when we have these breakdowns, when we realize that these things are really important, but we shouldn't leave them as by default. So we are almost in between this dysfunctional environments and burnout. We are when employees are navigating this landscape, the workplace culture landscape, they are almost confused. Like, how do I find meaning? How do I find purpose when all those things are happening and I need to catch up with the work? I need to almost go to the daily grind of work, but also find meaning and purpose in the meantime. So our proposition, our point of view is that we can be our own designers to define our own culture. So we can avoid culture by default. This is especially the case in Silicon Valley, right? Like we have all these narratives around startups and like they are bringing the unicorns, like this working 70 hours a week, those kind of things. Like, how do we almost take a stance on this and then bring our own voice into the table and define our own culture? Having said that, again, our theory of change is maybe we always think CEOs define culture, but there's another way. Maybe there needs to be a balance that the culture needs to be developed from bottom up as well. So it's like, we accept that CEOs define or give direction to culture, but there is also the other side of it, that the bottom up culture also should have a bigger stance in defining and creating culture. When we say culture, it's again very nebulous term, like, it can be huge, but as designers, we see this as an opportunity. One of the things designers do well is to simplify or to make things more understandable and accessible through visualization. So this is an example of that. We take this culture model from a business professor, James Heskett, I think. So according to his model, culture is an interplay between visible and invisible forces. Like, invisible forces are hard to change, like beliefs, values. People call them DNA of a company. But there are also visible things, like things that are more like the branding of a company, how teams are run, when you enter a building, all the things that are visible. When we see this dynamic of visible and invisible, we see an opportunity. Maybe there is a way we can, as designers, as culture designers, we can take these invisible things and make them more visible so we can assert our own beliefs and values in our workplaces. So it's a little theoretical, but I will show you some examples on that. So now I would like you to turn to you again. So find your peers and think about your own workplace. Or if you want to talk about your family, that's also fine. Think about beliefs and values, like going back to this. If culture consists of invisible and visible forces, how do we first maybe understand our beliefs and values? And the next step will be manifesting those values. So again, I will give 3 minutes just to talk about like what you care about at work, what you want to see more at work. It's really open, so and there's no right or wrong answer. It's really a discussion. Come to a point that, I really want to, for instance, in my work, I want to be more creative. So that's maybe in the next stage, I can think about a ritual or a strategy to become more creative. So I will give you, again, 3 minutes and just discuss your values and beliefs around culture, at workplace culture.
I work in a company that provides long-term care for the elderly, work in their homes, home care. And one of the attributes in our culture that I would really like to encourage and foment is creativity around solving problems. Mm-hmm. One model that we don't follow is like in a hospital where there are rules on how to do things. The model that we do try and follow is in the home, and you can come up with any kind of solution, it's whatever works between you and the client. So I really try to follow the creativity, to encourage the creativity as part of our culture.
I work in corporate training, and I want employees of companies to have more say in what they learn and how they learn, and be more proactive in this. And I think rituals at work can help.
Both of them are beautiful. Anyone else? Yeah.
I work with a program that's a mindfulness-based emotional intelligence training in companies. So one question is for people may work with that individually, but then how is their team, how is their cultural setup supporting that or not? And that seems an area that's being developed. So.
That's nice. Cool. I think we got some good leads. Those are good examples too, as well. So now let's talk a little bit about why we are thinking rituals can be a way to address these challenges around workplace culture. So we are framing rituals as going back to our culture model. Rituals help these invisible things like beliefs, values, motivations visible in our workplace lives. So in a way, rituals are manifestations of our beliefs and values. That's why if we can design them well, if we can craft these rituals in our workplaces, in a way, we will live by our values. I think that's almost like the hypothesis that we have. And when we look at traditionally, like from sports, from religion, without rituals, you really cannot see like beliefs and values. So I think in our work, we are looking at tradition and then see like what we can derive from, what patterns that we can derive from those to inform the current modern workplace. And I always get this question, what do you mean by ritual? So there are this like, almost like a misconception, routines are rituals, like what's the difference between ritual and routine? Another question I get is, what's the difference between habit and ritual? So that's why we decided to define it, just to, it's not a definite, like a set in stone definition, but just something that we can work on. So rituals are actions that we do as person or as a group with intentionality, and we do this with a set of scripts. Like either it follows a pattern or a set of actions, and it always has some kind of symbolism and meaning involved. So that's why it's different than routines. In routines, we follow them without almost thinking, similar with the habits. But in ritual, we have that like almost like higher level quality to it. So with ritual, we can almost like invest in that situation and create meaning from that situation. So that's a working definition. We are not saying this is the only definition, but and when we look at the literature, we see 3 or 4 kinds of work around rituals. One of them comes from organizational behavior. Another one is ritual studies, like goes back to Durkheim, like when he was studying religion, he realized the power of rituals. And then from that tradition, we have all this anthropology and performance studies that look at rituals. Maybe also from organizational behavior, there are a couple of very good studies from Harvard Business School. For instance, what they did is they looked at the existing, almost like impact of a ritual, and then find out that, for instance, they gave people in one study, from an eating ritual, they gave people a normal chocolate and a chocolate with a ritual. So before you eat the chocolate, you need to you need to follow a certain script. And they find out that people who follow the ritual have a better taste. So that's one of the interesting things. Like if you almost like have this little ritual to include, so you can increase the taste. And another study looked at grieving rituals. And then again, they found out that if people have certain rituals to grieve, their sense of loss is a little bit, and they get back, they bounce back easily than the person who doesn't have rituals. And this one study I really liked, it looked at the psychology of rituals, and they found out that there are three functions of a ritual from a social psychological perspective. So first function is rituals help us to regulate our emotions, especially if you look at the rituals around pre-game, like athletes' rituals, because they are about to enter this very high-stress situation. So rituals can help them in two ways. It can either calm them, or it can boost their adrenaline. So that's why they use the term regulate. So you can almost dial up and dial down your emotions. I think that's one function of ritual. Another one is performance state. So it helps you to regulate your performance as well. That's why it's, again, going back to the athletes or teams, it really helps them to increase their performance. And the last one is going back to the origin of a ritual, it helps people bond. So it's like a regulate people's connection to each other, connection to themselves. So this is a little bit theory. There are more to it. It's really a rich area. So yeah, if you have interest, I can always point to you more material. So from this, what we derive for our work is, based on that research, is that rituals have this power of like closing the loop between our mind and our bodies. So it's almost like if we act together, it will influence our mind and hearts, then we will feel a sense of bonding. Like the famous Steve Jobs walking meetings ritual. I think it was really, it had an intention, or it worked well, because when people walk together, it will create almost like a behavioral synchronicity, so they can work out things better. I think some of these findings show that ritual, if we are designing rituals, maybe we can look for ways to increase that behavioral synchronicity through movement and through thinking. I think that through that symbolism. And rituals can be huge. This is from who knows this one? I think this is from New Zealand. Yes. Before their rugby games, they almost adopted this Aborigine ritual, haka. Before the game, they perform this to almost like show their confidence. It works both ways. So it increases their confidence, but it also makes the other side afraid of the team. So it's like a two-way functionality. But rituals also can be super small. Like they can be, this is from Notre Dame. So before the players go up to the field, they touched to this play like a champion today. Margaret, my partner, she used to grow up with this. So this is really small, very subtle, but again, this idea of connecting to something more meaningful before the game will increase people's performance, people's team bonding, ritual bonding. And in our work, we identified that, so these are more like where we feed ourselves, like the research and looking at the existing ritual space. But what we see in workplaces, there are 5 areas that rituals can help teams, can help individuals. So it starts with transition. Some of them are more obvious, like the community and change and transition. If you look at the community one, for instance, it's like you want to create that sense of togetherness, sense of bonding for your team in workplace. You can devise these little rituals. Same with the change and transition. For instance, if you just hired a new person and you want to show who you are, maybe you can take that as an opportunity when you onboard that person. You can have these rituals to help them to see who you are, and then they can also adopt those values and beliefs when they are getting on board, for instance. But there are some less obvious ones for rituals to work. One of them is creativity and innovation. Coming from design space, we see that those ideas can help others, not just designers, but non-designers. Almost like when you start a meeting or when you are before starting a project, maybe you can almost like adopt these design rituals and then like seed into your team. Maybe over time, these rituals will help your team to get creative. So and the last two one of them is around conflict and resilience. These are when you have this moment of conflict and difficulty, how do you bounce back and then go with your team's existing routines, or even you need to almost heal from that conflict, right? I think when we look at the tradition, we see rituals have that power from natives, or from other traditions. We see these rituals from those spaces. Why don't we take them and adapt them to our new situations? And the last one is performance and flow. I think we talked about this already, but the idea is, can you use rituals to set people's mindsets so that they can perform better? So now, again, a little bit lecture, but now I want you turn back to you. So in the first round, we talked about your values, like what you want to achieve. Now think about moments in your workplace, like, oh, I want to, like for instance, your group, I want to be more creative. Like where can I think about that? Like where can I see the creativity ritual? Maybe it's before a meeting, or it can be when welcoming a new team member. So I would like you to discuss this in, again, 3 minutes, and then we will report back.
This was a birthday party. Okay. And it amounted to, somebody buying a cake and then everybody getting together. I mean, literally everybody, the whole 65 of them. And just having a social occasion. But the main thing I learned from that is this turned into an opportunity for people within the office to compare notes on where they might have had a hang-up or a problem in the way they were doing things. And in a very casual, non-threatening session, be able to get started on trying to find solutions. So this turned into where I could open my ears and learn a whole lot about what was not working right in an office that was running relatively well. So it wasn't that easy to get that input from just one-on-one conversations with the employees.
It's like an existing one. You can take that as an opportunity to amplify or build on the existing one. Yeah, that's a good one.
When you first start with another person, it's what has gone well for you in the last 24 hours, what's gone good, what's gone bad, and starting with that sort of topic is framing it a little bit for what's going to happen during the day.
Okay, it's like a check-in moment, like checking in.
Exactly.
Nice. Cool.
For employee engagement in the learning process, I think onboarding is really important step. So usually people are given lots of training materials at the beginning of their employment, and if we create expectations from people to provide feedback and help to improve learning materials, this is a good step into creating this more proactive learning environment.
Take that opportunity. We have one more person here. Yeah.
This isn't always just about, I guess, work. I was on a board, and I found that it was very negative all the time, and there were people that would hijack the agenda. So when I became the board chair, I put in this ritual that at the beginning of every board meeting, we talked about one good thing that was happening in our personal lives, and then the ritual of saying what was one thing they wanted to see come out of the meeting. And so what it did was everybody could say what they wanted, and they wouldn't hijack the agenda. And it was a little bit more positive because now they started off with something that was happy rather than just negativity. So it's still a work in progress, but that ritual has become like part of the meeting and people expect it. So.
That's awesome. I think that's like setting the tone, setting the stage, the tone, yeah. I think that's the power of ritual. It can be so small, but it really, yeah, make that switch between like that negativity to positivity. It's beautiful. Great. I think we have some good examples. So I want to show you some examples around those 5 areas of work. So just to make it a little bit more concrete. So we have been running workshops at the D.school, but also we also have our first Ritual Design Summit last May at the D.school. And the idea, I think, around rituals is really, making that, using the process of design to craft these rituals. So this almost like trusting the process itself to design those rituals. And based on these, I think those 5 areas emerged. So let me show you a couple of examples of these rituals. So one of them, the change and transition, as I mentioned, the onboarding rituals are the most obvious one. When you are taking this person to your team, that's an opportunity for you to show your values or help that person to adopt those values. So this is an example from Dropbox. They don't have this ritual right now, but when they were growing up, like as a company, they realized that they need to assert their values better. So that's why they came up with this Dropbox cupcake kit. So the idea here is Dropbox is one of the values. The symbolism behind cupcake is don't try to cook a big birthday cake. Start with a cupcake, small, be nimble and agile. So that was the value that they want to see in their employees. So cupcake symbolizes that. When someone joins the teams, joins the company, the first thing they get in their door, in their house is this cupcake kit. And it's like you can create your cupcake with these like ready-made materials, and then you become part of Dropbox. Now you make your first cupcake, now you are a Dropbox employee. I think that's the story that they were going after. So this is I think Atlassian has a similar one, like so companies are following this pattern, like finding these metaphors and then embodying that with these little rituals. Another one, the treasure hunt onboarding. This is from one of our classes. So the students, they were working with Microsoft. And again, that idea of, now we have all these trainings. How do we make this more playful and then show our values of playfulness, creativity? And then the idea is that you can go to a treasure hunt knowing people or knowing places inside the company. And it's more like a game that you play. Another one, this one is from SAP. Again, students were working with SAP. And the idea is, maybe, we can take a quick look. It's similar to treasure hunt, but the idea is people bring their favorite object in the first day of a new employee's first day, and then the person needs to find out what belongs to who. It's like an icebreaker between the new employee and then the existing employees. Let's look at a little bit performance one. This one is, I think Margaret designed this based on that Notre Dame example I showed you guys. So before leaving home, she touches this to have superpowers for the day. I think this is very symbolic. And she does this, she still does this. Another one from our class, the focus track. So one of our students, he had this, I think we all have this problem of attention disorder, that we can't focus. So what he designed is like a physical thing, a focus rack. Whenever I put this up here, that means that I am unavailable to others, and I'm doing serious, like deep work. I think people do this with their headphones these days. I think that's a similar idea, almost like signaling to others, signaling to yourself. This idea of now I am in the flow mode. Don't interrupt me. And another example is from IDEO Chicago. This is a little bit community, a little bit transition. So that in their story, they just bought a company. It was a merger, acquisition. But they wanted to, and they know that most of the mergers and acquisitions, they have this problem of culture, almost misfit. To avoid that, they designed this wedding ritual. And we talked to the designer, Annette. She's awesome ritual designer. And she told us that they really went super intentional about this. Like before the wedding, what they did is they interviewed the new companies, people understood their values, and then their own values. So they created a vow, just reflecting those two cultures. And then they literally ran a wedding ceremony that they signed, they had a cake. And again, this intentionality, like these days, everyone like buys a new company, or it's like now very regular. But bringing this layer of intentionality in culture, I think it helped this team, this company to avoid that culture clash between these two teams, two companies. A little bit again around community. So this is from healthcare, so healthcare industry. It's from Israel, I think from the New York Israel Diaconess Hospital. So you know, these days the checklist manifesto, you are familiar with checklist manifesto, right? Yeah, it's super popular, right? But what they realize is that, okay, they are following these checklists, but they are lacking something, like especially in an operating room. It's almost like so mechanical. There's this person lying here, and she has a family, she has this personality, and it's a very high-stake moment. That's why they decided to, before operating, I think this one particular surgeon and his care team, they decided to have this ritual they call moment of reverence. They just stop 1 minute, 2 minutes, and the nurse reminds people that, like, talks about that person's personal life, like she has a son, she has this life, and then just almost like recognizing that it's a person, and then bringing that meaning layer on top of checklists. I think that's again going beyond the functional, trying to address that meaning layer. Okay. Similar, this is again from a healthcare context. Have you guys heard of this ritual? I think it was on New York Times a couple of months ago. Again, the need for this ritual came from families of people who donated their organs. And one observation in this particular hospital, they realized that people don't show enough respect to the organ donor, and they literally, I think, it's like organically designed this ritual to show respect to the person who's about to donate their organs. Again, I think I want to go back to this idea of there's this functional need, like going checklists similar to like you need to donate an organ, but how do you bring back meaning to that situation so that it's not that dry and mechanical? I think now from that New York Times piece, lots of other hospitals are adopting this ritual, showing respect to the people that donate their organs. Okay, couple more examples. I mentioned that rituals can be used for conflict and resilience situations. This example is from a pharmaceutical company. I think the idea is whenever they have a failure, like how do you bounce back from that failure situation? They designed this failure wake party, adopting that religious concept to the workplace, and then designed this almost like, okay, we failed, but now we are back in business and we will go forward. I think that idea of taking a negative situation and then turning it into a positive situation. And one thing in these industries is failure is almost so common. Look, I think one of the challenges of these companies is how do we keep people's morale high when the failure rate is so high. And Google has a similar one. They run these yearly parties following the Mexican tradition, like I can't remember the Day of the Dead. So they show the projects that are dead just to celebrate it so that they can continue on their creative endeavors. Okay? And this last one, I think, maybe I can show that one as well. So the Atlassian is a software company. In their case, it's more proactive, like going back to your intention, how do we make teams more proactive? So to avoid conflicts, they have this little ritual called trade-off sliders. What they do is at the beginning of a project, they put all their variables, like the budget, time, and other things, and people show what the priority of the budget or the time and other things. So the team is aligned from the beginning of the project. So they don't need to go through a battle during the project. So this is more like the proactive ritual. And another conflict and resilience one is, I think this is, again, from one of our classes, burn the argument. When two employees have a conflict, they can almost write down their problems and then put onto a box, burn them, and then it will help them to open a new page. It's a little conceptual, but that's, again, the idea of how do we recognize that moment and then bounce back from that moment. Another, it's from our classes, from our recent classes, this idea of community and engagement. So in this one, they were working with Airbnb, and then the idea is how do we help employees bond together and engage more. So they create this 3 p.m. Tuesday ritual that they can almost have these activities to bond, and over time it builds up to this tournament idea. That was it. So I gave you some very different examples. Some of them are very emotional, some of them are more playful. But that's the, I think, richness of ritual. You can really play with those based on your situation. In certain cases, maybe the intention is playfulness. In other cases, the intention is reverence and showing respect. It really, I think, depends on that intention. It's like a tool for you to play with. So now, I want you to think about, now you saw some examples, like what might be some things, and you also discuss some moments to design for, like what kind of rituals you can design. I think that's the last piece. These were a little bit inspiration, and maybe you can think about a ritual that you can apply when you go back next week. So just one thing maybe I can mention about the strategy idea. I think what we observed in our workshops, in our research is rituals have some patterns. Like when you look at existing ones, there's always some rituals have an act of cleansing that help people almost follow that ritual to cleanse themselves. One of our friends talked about this idea of social technologies. Rituals devise 3 kinds of social technologies. One of them is food. So food helps people bond together. Another one is dance. When people dance, I think going back to that research, it helps them, or if they move together, it creates that behavioral synchronicity. And the last one she talks about is the costumes and masks. If you wear a special costume, that helps you to become a new person, and then you can act in that ritual situation. So these are some of patterns that you can think of when you are designing a ritual: food, dance, and costumes and masks. And then I think another one is exchanging gifts, having this phrases. They don't need to have a meaning, but you can also have a meaningful phrase. I think those are the things, when we look at the tradition of rituals, we see these as patterns. So now, spend 3 minutes again before we close up. Just like what kind of rituals you can bring to your work, it can be personal as well.
Well, this is an example that I ran into last month. We went to the manufacturing home of Ben & Jerry's ice cream. Uh-huh. And once you finish the tour of the facility and you go outside, they have a graveyard with all the old flavors that didn't work. Okay. And the people who go to the factory are Ben & Jerry fans, so they would go through the graveyard and say, "Oh, I remember, blueberry waffle and all the ones that didn't work." I thought it was a great ritual.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So one of the rituals we have as a family that I thought we could extrapolate into the workplace was we have a plate that combines the ritual of food for an accomplishment. We have 5 kids, so when one of the kids accomplishes something, we put the meal, and they get a special red plate that said, congratulations for your accomplishment. So I thought, why not apply that to work? We're trying to focus on more recognition. It's a cultural issue that we have at work, and so within my leadership team, trying to focus, we go out to a team dinner. It can be at a restaurant. Put that plate in front of that employee to recognize their accomplishment.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I think that's one of the power of ritual is you can remix, take from one situation and then, like as the examples showed, that's beautiful,
So thinking about those kinds of rituals where you celebrate successes, one of the things that we do is we have a retreat every summer, and we often put a bowl in the middle of the table, and everybody writes down a couple of their accomplishments and on a little scrap of paper, and they throw it into the bowl. And then we pass the bowl around, and other people pull the accomplishment out of the bowl, and everyone guesses who it might be. So it has a very different feel than going around the table and people reporting on their own accomplishments, and it becomes this fun kind of community building and acknowledging kind of ritual.
I think these are very good ones to close up our session. I would like to close up with this almost idea that I mean that's one of the things from tradition that we think rituals are rigid and they don't change. But I think there is, from our work or from one school of thought for ritual studies, say that rituals evolve based on the needs and wants of people in that community or in that context. So I think from one takeaway from today is, if you have rituals or existing rituals, think them as something that's dynamic, that you can change them based on the needs and the context of your work. With that mindset, you can really think of your culture like more fluidly. So it's not something that's established and fixed, but it's something that you can change. I think that's my final message for today. If you want to hear more, so we have a website. We collect our the existing literature, existing examples from ritual work. We also try to publish our work through Medium, through our book. I think follow us if you are curious, if you want to geek about ritual. We might have another summit in the new year. And then, yeah, thank you so much for your attention, for your interest. Thanks.